Hello guys, this is Dark Fox Sage 2 and we are back with our new fanfic, which is What If Naruto's Debt to Ino Became Love Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and please subscribe to the channel. It motivates me to upload more fanfic like these for you all. Now let's start the fanfiction. What are you going to just lay there? Ino frowned, chucking a few kunai in Shikamaru's direction, surprised to find that he did not budge. Purposely, all blades missed him, only grounding a few inches from his arms. Shikamaru situated himself beside a tree, unnerved. Sighing, Ino took a few steps closer, cocking an eyebrow. I could hit you if I wanted to, you know. She held her breath, becoming aware of just how empty her threat, beyond doubt. You don't have the guts. His eyes closed, he exhaled deeply. Again, another moment of daydreaming, interrupted. Lately, he hasn't been able to catch a peek of the clouds. Ino's been nagging at him, like his mother. He shuddered, not akin to that idea. I came here for help, Shika. Feeling frustrated, Ino grinded her teeth together, the echoes of bones clashing throbbing into her ears. Che, you didn't even ask for my help for this one. The teenager twitched at the sound of her whines, as if she were winding up for a round of verbal harassment. I didn't need to ask your help. She cried out, raising her kunai in between her eyes, squinting to prepare a launch right at his head. You can't be lazy. Sooner or later you have to go to a mission too, right? A sudden grin appeared on Shikamaru's face. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm done with my spring break. Shika bent his neck, leaning his head to the side as he witnessed the kunai whiz by his ear, stabbing onto the tree a few feet behind him. Sure you are, he commented, proceeding to smirk at her, but instead yelped at the sight of a kunai heading straight for his face, ducking quickly to find the blade split onto the tree bark that he was lying upon. The blade split a few hairs atop of his head. He scratched at his ear nervously, turning to glance at the weapon, examining it. How could that be? He thought she only had 5 of those kunai. Shrugging, he pulled himself up to his feet, brushing the dirt that accumulating onto his vest. So I underestimated you, big deal. You have no friends, Shika, you know you love having me around. Ino chuckled, placing her hands on her hips. This day was the usual for Ino Yamanaka. Certainly she had grown accustomed to waking in the early morning hours. She's even had her hand at making breakfast. If you count milk and cereal as cooking, though. But it has become a routine for the blonde, to awake at the early hours and head on over to the dear old river that was awaiting her, and there would be her friend Shikamaru also awaited for her arrival, in a grumpy mood to boot. Yep, that has become her schedule for the past week now. Not to mention the entire ordeal of swimming through the bitter water. Fortunately, she's gotten better, to the point where she hasn't had to scream bloody murder in the bottomless area of the river. As much as she wanted to let Naruto know about her whereabouts, she hasn't seen much of the loudmouth ninja. Of course, he would make it his duty to leave a few post-it notes, all over the house to mention a whole journal entry on how his day was. Oh, how she enjoyed ripping them out of her bedroom door and throwing those small yellow stickies into the trash. But really, it was thoughtful of him. According to the sticky notes, he was busy on a mission with Kakashi-sensei and Sasuke-kun, and was to be back today. To be honest, the past week has been rather quiet, and although she would not admit it, she's been using Shikamaru as a pseudo-replacement for Naruto. She never realized just how much influence that guy has had on her. To the point where being alone was not as acceptable as it used to be. Like she used to like it. And shouldn't you be at your folks' home now? The Jonin finished, his aggravation rising. Apparently, she has not been heeding any of his words. She continued to gaze blankly at his face, to the point where he started to snap his fingers in front of her face. Huh, she said aloud. Oh, folks home, why? You're not serious, are you? Shikamaru rolled his eyes, his hand shoving in his pocket to fiddle for an object of some sort. You're the only person I know who would forget their own birthday. He spoke indifferently, pulling out a small box, nudging it in her direction. Happy birthday nonetheless, idiot. Completely shocked, Ino reached for the small package. Wow, I don't know what to say. You can start off with a thank you, that would be nice. No duh. She held a smug look on her face, her digits drew small circles around the wrappings. Seriously, thank you. Embracing him, she could feel his nerves stiffen. Shikamaru was never the touchy type of friend, in her dearest opinion, and it amused her so in moments like this. Now that she pondered over the subject, how the hell couldn't she remember? A year ago, she would have made an entire list for the city of Konoha, now she could not even recall the day she was born. How strange. Thanks for the reminder. Pulling away, she began to run in the opposite direction, waving her hand behind her. I guess you lucked out. She chuckled. Pumping the gift in the air, she yelled, this better be nice. In a joking manner before disappearing into the woods, leaving Shikamaru to himself. He exhaled deeply, snapping his tongue. What a weirdo, he declared, taking a seat onto the comforting pasture that called out to him. Settling upon the grass, he lifted his sight towards the warm atmosphere, observing the ruffled clouds in the sky. Finally, time to daydream. His eyelids closing on him, he felt that a nap was in order. As Ino walked the old back trails towards the Yamanaka house, she could feel herself grow slightly nervous. It has been a while since she last visited her parents' home, around 2 months. In all honesty, her parents would never approve of even partial events that she has endured. But then again, as the old saying goes, parents just do not understand. 88,888,888,888. Well, honey, I thought you would never come. Her mother kissed her cheek, smearing away the lipstick that stuck onto her daughter. Ino continued to nibble on her cake slice, slightly humored by the way her mother overreacted. Yeah, Mom, she said plainly, turning to smile at her father. So what's that about living alone? Is it as great as you thought it would be? He had first hoped that she would grow desperate from her lack of domestic art, for lack of a better word, and come home running. However, that was not the case. He was beginning to regret agreeing to let his daughter go off into the outskirts Konoha, no matter how close her house was to his. Course it is. Where have you been? I've been calling all morning. I know you don't like waking up early, but the phone was bound to wake you up. Ino paused, turning to glance at her mother. Her mother was quite intelligent when it came to snooping around. I was out with Shika. Ah, isn't that cute? I just knew you two would realize. Mother, please, not this again. She stabbed her fork through the piece of chocolate cake, sighing grimly. Although she knew sooner or later her mother would bring up Shikamaru, she was not quite prepared to start explaining herself, like always. For some reason, her parents were practically pushing her to get with her friend, well more her mother than her father, and it always irked her when they did that. Well, what were you doing then? Training with him. She smiled innocently. What do you think I was doing? Raising her eyebrows, she glanced at both her parents, smirking. A moment of silence wavered between the three of them, and Ino enjoyed every moment of it. She absolutely thrived in making her parents weary. Still, the moment did not last as long as her mother proceeded to speak. Ino, you wouldn't mind doing me a favor, would you? Her daughter gave her a questioning glare. Since you haven't been working at the flower shop anymore, I'm assuming you have a lot of time in your hands, right? Well, what is she, rubbing it in? She thought, internally. Currently the status of unemployment was becoming a common word in her dictionary, until her rebound. She needed a comeback, and she needed it rather swiftly. The way words scampered through the components of Konoha, people most certainly were doubting her return to being a kunoichi. Okay then, you'd help your dear mother, right? What do you want me to do? Just watch over Kurenai's baby, will you? Miss Yuhi has a baby. Since when? Shocked, Ino slammed her hand onto the counter, leaning closer to her mother, who only chuckled at her daughter's behavior. You have yet to keep up with the times, she's been married for a year, remember? Number. Completely clueless yet interested all the same, Ino leaned closer. She married your old sensei, remember? She did. Completely shocked, Ino recalled moments where she would tease Asuma sensei about Kurenai, but never thought their relationship would evolve. Wow, really? I can't believe it. Your old sensei actually stopped by a few days ago and specifically asked for you. Inoichi interrupted, tapping his finger onto the counter. He jerked his leg, sprawling them both atop the chair aside him in a relaxing manner. He seems to have a lot of confidence in you. He finished with a warm smile. You wouldn't disappoint him, would you, Ino? You know what that means, Ino mumbled to herself. What? He raised his tone, launching a stern glance in her direction. I mean, yeah, of course I would. He, she reassured, chuckling to herself nervously. By the way her father stared at her, she knew she had but no choice. Naruto Uzumaki dragged his feet into the house, sluggishly closing the door behind him. He plucked at his clothes, observing the dirty splotches of blood and grit from the entire week. Sighing, he was happy to know that a shower was in order. A nicely extended searing bath, if he was lucky. He passed through the kitchen, taking himself to a screeching halt. A few items caught his eye. There in the counter, practically basking in pure glory, was half a chocolate cake, protected by the glass container. Completely malnourished, Naruto made a mad dash for the cake, tearing the lid off before he eagerly grabbed a handful of chocolate mesh, mashing it into his mouth. He hummed, absolutely loving the taste of chocolate in his mouth, something besides stale bread which he was growing disgusted with. Even the strongest of Anbu members could not endure the anguish that was Kakashi sensei's stale bread, that is if his eccentric sensei had even enough generosity in his soul to offer his pupils bread. The brown crumbs smeared around his lips, he buried his face into the cake, forgetting the mess of cake bits on the counter as he finished as much junk that was in his mouth in one gulp. Once the large portions were in fact gone, Naruto exhaled deeply, staring at the ceiling as he licked the edges of his mouth. Yum! He cried out, happily. It wasn't ramen, but at least it was not Kakashi sensei's week-old bread. Finally composed with himself, he noticed a few small boxes of presents that were at the far end of the counter. Curious, his chocolate-covered fingers picked the smallest one, bringing it close for observation. He examined the pattern of the wrapping, wondering if Ino was kind enough to leave him a gift. When he did find a small tag attached to the gift, he pulled at it, leaving a few brown streaks. Happy birthday, Ino. He licked the roof of his mouth, getting at the final portions of cake. Happy birthday, Ino. Naruto scratched the inside of his ear. Her birthday isn't until. He twitched, suddenly remembering that a whole week had passed since he had last seen her. Oh shit, he said to himself, running to the living room, searching for the calendar that was placed at the living room table. Oh shit, he cried out, instinctively grabbing onto his hair, pulling it. I didn't get her anything. Oh shit, she's been talking about this for weeks. Oh shit, I promised to get her something. Oh shit, he continued ranting, dragging his hand down his face. That was when he noticed his cake-covered hands. Oh shit, he repeated, realizing that he had just coated himself with chocolate. I need a damn bath, he stated, finally, stomping his way into the bathroom, locking the door shut. Now of course it would have been heroic to believe that the clothes he had taken off were in fact from an enemy. But that was not the case. Actually, the mission was pretty easy in his opinion. For a B-ranked mission, all he, Sasuke, and Kakashi sensei had to do was get rid of some criminal from the water country. Getting rid of him was the easy part, listening to Sasuke, however, was not. And that was what resulted in the blood, Sasuke's blood to be specific. They've gotten in a little scuffle that Kakashi sensei had to break up. But that was how it always was when the three of them ever went on missions. He was pretty sure Sasuke had a cup full of his own blood splattered on his precious clothes, too. Fair was fair, nonetheless. Ah, he breathed out, stepping into the shower, turning the warm knob all the way. Reaching for the shampoo, he pondered over the idea of how to get himself out of this predicament. After all, pretending to go to sleep would only result in Ino hopping on him in the middle of the night and demanding her present. He could admit that he did not manage to her anything, however, the very idea only implied that he was not interested on celebrating the day of her birth. Which would also entail, hypothetically speaking of course, that she did not cross his mind enough for him to care. And that in itself, was a flat-out lie. So how did that whole phenomenal rendezvous go, Dobi? You haven't talked about Sakura all week, Sasuke's words echoed into his mind. As he permitted the water to trickle onto his body, he thought of how much he didn't think of Sakura the whole time. 8,888,888,888. I better be getting a mission soon, I'm short on cash. Ino mumbled to herself, gripping the plastic bag full of groceries. She loved her parents and all, but visiting them oftentimes brought on that nasty guessing game of who she'll end up with. Why were they pushing for her to get with someone anyway? They should do the opposite, actually, in her dearest opinion. Fooling with the keys, she twirled them in her finger, stepping onto the stoop before her front door. She closed her eyes, humming a small tune in her mind, reaching towards the lock. Unfavorably, it was too early to go to sleep, but she knew that she would quickly grow bored inside the house alone. Oh well, the way things looked, she'd be severely busy tomorrow caring for Asuma-sensei's baby anyway. What she didn't know was the Naruto who was keeping an eye on the peephole, grinning mischievously as he unlocked all the security devices Ino set up. Damn, how much he hated doing that. Opening the door in a swift fashion, he watched the girl in front of him carry on with her humming, her key jabbing his abdomen. As soon as she comprehended the soft surface her keys were setting upon, she shot her eyes open, gasping. Naruto, what the hell are you doing here? She cried out, in utter shock and content all the same. I came back, duh. Before she could arrive at a response, he situated his index finger onto her lips. Okay. Don't say a word, I have a surprise for you. Oh boy, she murmured, sarcastically. I told you not to talk. Scolding, he returned back to a smile. Okay, this is what's going to happen, because I said so, and don't you dare refuse. She held a squirmed expression. What are you talking about? I'm taking you out, okay. So you can't say I'm cheap and whatnot. He pushed her in the direction of the house. We're going out to get something to eat, so come back out when you're ready. Ino squinted her eyes, trying her best to comprehend just exactly what he was preparing. A dinner. That sounded like a crappy way out of buying a present to her. Fine, I'm ready. Slightly disappointed by his lack of actually getting her anything, she figured she might as well do something other than force herself to sleep. No, not like that. Go put on some nice clothes. He chuckled, shoving her into the apartment some more. Nice clothes. What I'm not wearing isn't good enough. Offended, Ino tugged her shirt. What are you trying to say, Ino, please, stop being so difficult. People say you're the prettiest girl in Konoha, I want to see it for myself. He shooed her off, closing the door for her. She held her finger, forming a reply but stopped when a few certain words sprung in her mind. Naruto waited patiently. He was seated atop a few steps in front of the house. Twiddling his fingers, he wondered how long it was going to take Ino to step out of the house. By the way, dusk had already turned into night. He believed she had taken somewhere near an hour to get ready. Honestly, why do women always take the longest time to get ready? Okay, I'm ready, Ino spoke, causing Naruto to flinch. Don't do that. He paused, his curious eyes taking a hold of the dress that hugged her curves so loosely. The little buzz about Miss Ino Yamanaka being the most attractive girl in Konoha was true, but he didn't quite expect to be impressed so easily. For once, her hair was not in her usual pigtail, her long tresses reaching towards her hip. It brought out her femininity, by the way the subtle glow from the street lights shined down on her. She narrowed her eyes in his direction, still, even when aggravated she could not amend her striking appearance. What are you looking at, geez? Ino rolled her eyes, taking a few steps in front of him, finding that he did not budge from his step. She had not noticed it until now, but the clothes that Naruto wore were not exactly his usual attire. He had actually wore some sort of slick vest with a simple white shirt underneath, the cuffs of his sleeves were of course unbuttoned. She guessed that the dinner was sincerely going to be formal. This might sound slightly odd, but I'm going to blindfold you, alright? He spoke from behind her, settling the cloth over her eyes, tying a knot in the back. She protested at first, but quickly went silent as she could no longer see what was in front of her. What's the point of doing that? It's a surprise, oye, just go along with it, will you? He slowly seized her hand, acknowledging that any sudden movements would probably have him ending up with a black eye of some sort. He crossed their fingers, bringing it towards his torso. Alright, just stay close to me. Naruto then took a step forward, without much of a warning. Ino gasped, instinctively pulling herself closer to Naruto. What are you doing, idiot? The response had him laughing a moment, before he continued to walk. Taking you to a nice place. You're not going to dump me in the woods, are you? In a rather frightened tone, she whispered. Maybe. He tipped to the side, murmuring into her earlobe. She trembled under his voice, finding it to be a complete distraction alongside her balance. Naruto. No, I'm not, calm down. He shook his head, wondering just how insane their conversation must have been perceived in the eyes of bystanders. Silence filled the atmosphere, the chirps of crickets were more than apparent. In the cool September evening, the moon brought about quite the luminosity. There came a ginger haze from the street lights, followed by the shady merges of dark trees. Naruto could feel Ino's fingers tighten under his grasp, as there came a fastening of pace for him. His face flushed as he gazed at the way she smiled in pure curiosity. Although there were patches of people here and there, as they approached the central city of Konoha, he felt as if it were only the two of them. A warm surge of blood filled under his eyes, and he forced himself to concentrate upon the streets. What am I doing? He asked himself, feeling a tinge of guilt pour into his chest. Naruto could not explain the significance of her smile, and how just being with Ino in general has become a need more than a wish. Hey, Ruto, she whispered, her voice whisking with the small gusts of winds. Yeah, slightly dumbfounded, he decided it was best to keep these thoughts to himself. I know this is going to sound stupid, but did I do anything crazy that day I was sick? She bit her lip, hoping it was nothing out of the ordinary. Taken aback by the abrupt question, Naruto lifted his head towards the sky, in an effort to evoke the memory. Sure you did, you challenged me to a duel. Number I didn't. Course you did, you're a crazy drunk, I must admit. No I didn't. Her neck rotated, her unoccupied hand reaching for a soft punch. Come on, really, did I start acting goofy? I'm serious Ino, you got your kunai out and solemnly challenged me to a fight. Naruto witnessed the blush form on her cheeks. In a sudden outburst, she cried out, I blame this on you, you and your nasty sake. The slowly approaching echoes of music filled her ears, reverberating into her mind. The laughter of the public, the sounds of shoes clacking onto the concrete surface, the chit-chats of the folks around her, she could touch the romance that filled the environment. She could feel a pang of excitement hit her. Hey, my sake isn't nasty, Naruto pouted, wondering how both Tsunade and Jiraiya would respond to that. Yeah right, who won anyway? In that fight, She leaned closer to him, a rather smug expression that was fixated on her like so. He shivered, the memory of Ino's unanticipated kiss becoming rather clear in his mind. That didn't really see count as a fight, it was more of a one-sided battle if anything. Stuttering through his answer, he hoped she couldn't see through that blindfold of hers, and see just how uneasy she was making him. So I won, didn't I? He sighed, his tongue glazing over his bottom lip, feeling his heart literally run through his ears. Turning towards the place of destination, he impulsively extended his arm to the flicker of vivid lights that flickered ahead of them. There it is, we're here. In a wicked way, he was actually relieved. There it is, we're here. Ino cringed, the sudden outburst left her startled. Yet, before any loose retorts could be shouted, her hung arm was jerked forwards. She cried out by yet another surprise, finding warm hands press against her bare back, pushing her forwards. Feeling secured by Naruto's guidance, she allowed herself to be led, where the heels of her shoes stepping upon a much harder surface, the echoes of her shoes muddled with the melody in the air. Don't panic, was the last reassurance she received from him, blindfolded. Once he gently tugged the knot from her blonde locks, she felt the firm grip of the cloth undo, unraveling in front of her. Auburn luminosity filled the room, entirely filled with people. Her mouth hung open, she observed the bunches of people whom were seated in multiple chairs. Ha! Too shocked to thank me. Didn't think I could provide a lady like yourself with a nice engagement, He leered, walking a few steps ahead, deeper into the place. I'm impressed, she blurted, following him towards a seat for two. As she sat herself onto the cushion, she folded her hands onto the glass table, seeing her reflection smile back at her. By the way he gestured at the people sitting on the next table, he seemed to have been quite familiar with this restaurant type, joint, as Ino liked to believe it was. Course you are, he chuckled, in such a confidence that left her apprehensive. I love this place. He drummed his fingers against the fragile counter, leaning back against his chair, causing the two front legs to tilt forward. They always play the best music. One thing was for sure, he was searching for something by the way his eyes scanned across the empty floor adjacent to all the tables. What are you doing? Nothing. He shifted his gaze back onto her. Say, Ino, you wouldn't care to dance, He offered her his hand, across the table, sweeping his digits against the knuckles of her folded hands. She automatically pulled away, shaking her head, her locks swaying. She had a wild look on her face, so much as to push her chair back, completely embarrassed. Rose-red streaks were smudged under her glazed blue eyes, as she cried out, Are you crazy? He pulled his hand back, appearing rather disappointed. What? Ah, come on, you know you want to dance, listen to the music, Ino, it's calling out to you. He wrinkled his nose, bewildered by her sudden timid behavior, but not all that surprised. When it came to the actual public, Ino was not quite the type of person to throw herself out to people, no matter how noisy she was known to be. Snapping his fingers, he pulled himself from the chair, instantly heading towards her side. Naruto, I don't think we can dance here. She twisted her neck, side to side, frightened at the many groups of people whom had their eyes fixated on the two of them. Ino submerged herself, latching onto the metal chair handles for support as she sunk deeper in her chair. Her dress was caught in between the tangles and mess, rising up towards her knees. A squirm expression played upon her lips, and Naruto could only stand and watch the show that was Ino Yamanaka. Are you done? Imagining a watch upon his wrist, he took a glance back and forth for a moment or two, his foot tapping. No one else is dancing. She cried out in her loud whisper, one arm flaring to shoo him away. What she thought would be a splendid night was turning into some sort of nightmare for her. We'll look like idiots. His hand then jammed into his pocket, the other extended in her direction. She paused, blue eyes lowering her gaze at his open palm. Trust me, all right, he spoke in a low husk, the baritone intonation drove a few quivers. The jazz melody soon faded from the dance floor, following the taps of a tambourine, the notes of a piano clear in her thought. A few beats of a drum blended with the tune. Ino perked her head, a small smile forming. This had got to be about the craziest thing she's ever done. That one statement alone eased her. Her hand reached, clasping onto the offer. It was unimaginable, the way her heart raced at the thought of dancing in public, especially with Naruto. She could feel her knees grow weak as he lifted her from the chair, greeting her with his trademark grin. He bobbed his head with the tune, snapping his fingers in his ridiculous routine. Their hands linked, she shook her head at the imminent discomposure. He pulled her towards the middle of the empty floor, where she felt wandering eyes burn on her. Completely unaware, or otherwise ignorant of the audience, Naruto took a hold of both of her hands, singing along with the words of the song. Why do you build me up, buttercup baby, just to let me down? He moved from side to side, bringing her palm towards his chest, utterly entranced by the sound of music, and mess me around. And then worst of all, you never call, baby, when you say you will, but I love you still. Eyes shut tight, she threw her head to the side, a few laughs came from her amusement. As uncomfortable as she first felt, it all disappeared by the way he exaggerated the words of the song, breaking her tension. And as she witnessed the people with a look of enjoyment in their warm gaze, she felt a silent acceptance. I need you more than anyone, darling, you know that I have from the start. He turned her with a twist of his wrist, swiftly drawing her a few inches closer, his hand on the small of her back. He raised their folded hands, they swayed with the beat of the song, Ino attempting not to step on his fast-moving feet. His mouthed the last verse of the chorus, concentrating on the way she beamed at him, so build me up, buttercup, don't break my heart. Naruto paused from his singing, if you will, and took 2 long strides to the left, 2 to the right, zigzagging through the floor. Ino could not help but chuckle at the idiocy they both represented, becoming an attraction. He spun her, leaning as he stated, still embarrassed. Ino rolled her eyes, though an open-mouthed grin appeared as she grunted, number. She said plainly, sincerely, feeling as if it were only the two of them. He literally whisked her away. She felt the meshed emotions of flutters, jitters, nerves. Ino witnessed the confidence in his lead, and found that quite attractive. He always flourished in opportunities such as this, where the world sought nothing but to judge, and one way or another he proved to progress unscathed. It amazed her how much he did not care for opinion. Misplaced in reality, lost in his stare, Ino could no longer see a smile on his lips, but a fervent concentration on her. In fact, her feet have since refrained from shuffling to keep with his. He gave up on keeping in tune, soon stopping altogether. His hand relaxed on her back, the texture of her dress delicate against his palm. They were caught gaping at one another, equally anxious to move, speculating the line of friendship and whether they had thus far crossed it. Ino felt her heart swell in her chest, the melody of the song once again blending into another. The era of the 60s continuing on without them. He leaned a few inches closer, attempting the unexpected, but the intimacy was quickly spoiled by the wave of applause that erupted from behind them. Ino lowered her gaze, staring at the wooden floor awkwardly, keeping away from Naruto. What was it? The feeling that swirled in her abdomen, scaling to her bosom. Biting onto her lip, she acknowledged the flush on her face. A mesh of thoughts passed her. Do I like him as a friend? If I tell him, will it end? Will he look at me the same? Does he see it as a game? Well, I'm famished. Naruto cried out loudly, in his phony way. Turning into the direction of their table, hoping to keep his dim-witted impulses undetected. He witnessed Ino return to her seat and stressed his sigh. He knew it was an awful idea to take her to a place like this, and if he did not control himself soon, she'd accuse him of something. Something he's unwilling to admit. Because he believed it was not true, primarily, he had hoped to have absolute adoration for Sakura Haruno. The truth was, what was he willing to give, for this take? As the menus were handed to them both, followed by a flattering remark on their dance moves, Ino kept her eyes fastened onto small print in front of her. At this rate, Her hunger was deteriorating, she was more on the road to nausea. And as much as her eyes squinted in her rendition of being an Oscar-nominated actress, her actions had appeared inept. Please don't tell me you're getting a salad. She unwillingly dropped the menu onto the table, narrowing her eyes, completely offended by that comment of his, wisecracker. What the hell is that supposed to mean? It means order something worth paying for. He lifted an eyebrow, maintaining his attention towards the list of foods. In a smug motion, he licked his index finger, flicking through a page, his eyes shifting onto her. And you say this because I'm a girl, right? So you automatically assume I'm only willing to eat a salad because I care so much about my figure. Although, vanity aside, she did mind what she consumed, once in a while, but by the way he was diverting this supposed conversation, he made her seem like those typical Konoha woman, Sakura's type, nonetheless. That was an insult on its own. She cracked her fingers, over her head, a rather arrogant smirk plastered on her lips. Okay then, I'll just have everything on the menu. I haven't had anything to eat all day, not to mention it's that time of the month and so, I'm damn hungry. She declared, handing him the menu, pleased by the way his jaw dangled from shock. His stunned state soon altered, however, to disbelief. Sure you will, even if I were to afford all that crap on the menu, you would never eat it all. How sure are you about that? Very. He placed both elbows onto the table, his chin resting upon his thumbs. But, since I'm taking you out for this rendezvous, I'm picking what we're going to eat. Why? Because. Naruto stuck his tongue out, hoisting his hand in the air for a waiter. And no matter how nasty the food is, you must eat it. So what? You're going to pick the nastiest food you can find. That's beautiful, kid. Just the present. She chuckled, calming herself once the waiter arrived. Her glare darted to the blonde, unsure how far he would go in his bluff, or was it a bluff? I'll get me some this, and this, he pointed to menu, which was held erect, making it blind to Ino's eye. By the way the waiter seemed to hum in approval, it happened to calm her down a bit. Hey, do you think you can actually afford it? I'm not poor, Ino. He patted his pocket. You can't buy me love, Naruto. Sure I can't. Love is free, Ino. Holding on to the words, she allowed for it to linger in the air, happening to overlook Naruto's tendency to fight for the last word. So why'd you take me here, Naruto? Because I wanted to show you a good time, Ino. I thought love was free. She remarked, nonchalantly. Fooling with the pepper box, she tapped onto it with her finger, watching the bits of black plunge to the glass table, like black snowflakes. Sure it's free, food isn't. So why didn't you just show me love? Awaiting a retort, she paused when he responded with silence. She tilted her head to see that he was dumbstruck, biting onto his lip like a 5-year-old, desperate for words. It was not until a few seconds later that her words registered into her intellect. Automatically she flinched nervously, causing the pepper box to spill over, stuttering for words to launder the mess that she has verbally created. A rush of scarlet stroked against his cheeks, across the bridge of his nose. He opened his mouth, as if he were to utter a response, but hastily locked his jaw shut. Ino could feel the burning embarrassment etch into her stomach, breaking her courage to stare at him. She brought her gaze towards the spilled raven snowflakes, a few blonde curls covering her uncomfortable expression. I didn't mean it the way. Please don't interpret it that way. I'm really happy you brought me here. When it came to awkwardness, she always spilled every single form of thought out onto the table, for all to witness. It was not a very good spectator sport, especially in situations like this. Man, I'm making a fool out of myself. Naruto bowed his head, his tone of voice lowering into a pure murmur. Ino, if you don't think he interrupted himself, taking a gulp of the saliva that managed to accumulate. Extending his arm, he impulsively felt the need to wipe away the aura of uncertainty in her tone, but before he grabbed onto her balled fists of frustration, a gloved hand abruptly swept in front of his eyes. The space in between them was interrupted by two plates filled with some sort of cuisine. He darted his fleeting look to Ino, who shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her cheeks carried etched lines of rouge. As passed her an apologetic smile, he could not avoid the way his mouth watered by the mere aroma of delicious salty food that he literally lusted for. Ino promptly rolled her eyes, reaching for a fork, a small giggle escaping her. So what's this? Fantastic stuff. Eyebrows arched, she picked at what she could not describe. In front of her was a touch of a meal her father would conjure in his latest attempts of being a chef. Fortunately, it did not pertain to the burnt-over smell. God, you look like you're going to stuff yourself. Lifting her view, she watched Naruto bring the plate to his mouth, shoving half of the fried rice into his mouth. Swallow, idiot, she cried out, kicking him with her heel, watching his expression of sweet ecstasy cut short. Why ow, he howled, biting onto his lip. What? I'm starving. This is real food. Even if he did explain his way of nutrition from the past week, he knew she wouldn't approve anyway. Who cares? Eat like a real person. She barked, taking a small scoop of whatever it was she had reluctantly towards her lips. Pausing, she asked, what is this anyway? Eat it, delicious, were the only conceivable words that she managed to heed. What she saw was Naruto continue to eat like a starved child, finishing the last few spoons of his plate. Honestly, it was comical watching the way he drove the poor food into his mouth, his cheeks bulging with food. Decent, she commented, finding the food rather tasty in truth. Sweet and sour all in one, something she was needing for a while. When she dug her spoon for another portion, she caught a glimpse of desire from across the table. You're not full yet. Are you kidding? You're an idiot. A starving one, my friend. Oh, what a pity, she frowned, nipping into the spoon, because this stuff, chewing softly, she lingered toward the frown that plastered his face. Delicious, man. Can I have some, then? Huh, heck no, I love this. Ino chuckled, another portion of rice hitting her tongue. Again and again, driving him crazy. Hunger splashed his visage, even a few of drool slicked his bottom lip. He ogled her seconds more, her spoon never leaving his sight. Feeling amused and abusive all the same, she suddenly gave in on the puppy dog stare from across the counter. Fine. Without warning, his hands held onto the ends of the plate. Really? He jerked, but the food remained unadjusted. Hey, I thought you were gonna give me some. The anticipation heavy in his tone, he pouted. Sure I will, I'll feed it to you, of course. Oh, Naruto grinned, daringly, unhesitant to take a seat beside her. I see, you think I'm going to be embarrassed like you were. Not really. Aggravated, she regretted ever offering him anything. So I can't be Mr. Social Butterfly, geez. Whatever happened to that? Looking past the loud, blatant emotion that spilled from her, he could not disregard what she also was unintentionally revealing either. That social butterfly persona of yours. When we were younger, you were Miss Popular. I don't quite care about that anymore. She shouted, enraged, eyes squinted. She roughly slapped her hands onto the edge of his chair in front of her. Rather than thrust as much energy into shoving him away, she felt the nausea return for a second round. He placed his hands atop of hers, grazing it with his fingertips. I care about you, Ino. Sure you do, she blurted, surprised with the insensitive response herself. He laughed quietly, tilting himself closer to her, hands never leaving her sight. What do I have to kiss you to prove it to you? Kiss. Suddenly that sounded familiar. The husk of his voice. The linger in his eyes. It all felt familiar. She felt this way before. And it hit her, seeped into her like acid. The taste of sake, he tasted like sake. She could feel the tingles in her tongue when she kissed him. Kissed him. When she was drunk, nonetheless. The intense flutters then ran down her abdomen when she did it. The flurry of confusion, of her sentiment running high, magnetized by the alcohol, by drowsiness. By the way, she lusted after just kissing him, only kissing him. And he let her. Simply allowed it. And now that she recalled the moment of what she did, all for the expression of sorrow she felt when she cut him. A heavy blush rose under her eyes. She could feel the undetectable fractures cracking under her feet, her heart plummeting into her stomach. But that couldn't have had happened, could it? Honestly, it was simply out of the question. Ino. Naruto observed her many expressions, witnessing her convert from the laughter in her eyes to the unreserved realization. Some sort of mathematical equation scrapped and scribbled in her mind, by the way the blue orbs skimmed. Her mouth formed words he could not comprehend, in her silent chatter. As if he had broken the spell that sealed her speech, she flinched, taking a glance to the left and right, a touch of rouge was draped over her cheeks. Even for a woman, she had 1,000,001 emotions he wished he could comprehend. Temptation insisted on dwelling on his thoughts, but famine was ripping his stomach apart at the time. Manners were not his forte, and any minute now he was going to wolf the mess of food on her plate, whether she permitted him to or not. So about that food. Are you that desperate? Unbelievable, she thought, his patience was quite as impressive as cheap cologne. She latched onto the spoon, pulling out in front of him, dangling it. Open your mouth, she sighed, her palm under the spoon as she blew at the hot fumes. He blinked, mouth agape, pointing towards the metal. I thought you were kid. The item of question was shoved into his mouth, savored by his taste buds. And oh boy did he need that. Eat, she commanded, pulling away the food, dipping her spoon for another portion. Reverting her gaze back to Naruto, she was surprised to find him absolutely still, to the point where his lower lip parted from where the spoon once was. The way he appeared, pouting, in his blank stare, was utterly gorgeous in his goofy off-the-wall way. By some means, whatever was driving him at the moment, he was patient. I don't mean to interrupt, a waitress extended her arm over the two-head, placing the bill ticket onto the table. She pressed the restaurant's menu against her chest, her russet bangs covering a portion of her right eye. By the name displayed on her clip, Mitsumi had a nice young smile attached to her, in the girlish way only a teenager can pull off. You two are such a cute couple, Mitsumi commented, her gaze darting to Ino who avoided it, turning away, face reddening. Anyway, this is a compliment from us, we all loved watching you dance. She squealed, placing a dark glassed bottle on the table, 2 wine glasses included. The waitress has one last curtsy, nodding in approval in Naruto's direction before giggling her way back to the kitchen. Did ya hear? She said we were a cute couple. Naruto grinned, reaching for the wine, eager to pop it open in between his teeth, spitting the cork aside. Maybe she's right. He seized the glass in a delicate fist, pouring the glass to the top, taking a full swing. It's even better when it's free, he mused, licking his lips. Alcohol doesn't appeal to me. Sure it doesn't. Snickering, he poured a half-glassed serving of wine nonetheless. I'm not drinking that. Ah, come on Ino, live a little. It's your birthday. It's bad for you. So is fast food but we all eat it anyway. He presented her the glass, content to witness her take his offer. Ino's face squirmed, the aroma of thick alcohol filling her senses. A little bit of fear, a little bit of curiosity, she took one glance at Naruto, he nudged his glass towards her, a soundless toast. She grinned boldly, a second before swallowing the glass, feeling the splash of grape and alcohol sting her throat, rolling into her abdomen. It tickled all the way down. 8,888,888. They leisurely strolled along the grass trails. Naruto turned, staring intently at her. He watched her attempt to disregard the September gusts of winds. Although it was a long process, he felt the night was ending rather hurriedly. He felt the need to hold on to the night, before the world would completely spin before him. Thank you, she fought the silence that grasped her surroundings, pausing to await his reaction. For everything, for the food, the dancing, the fun. I had quite a time. Ino lifted her chin, seeing the taller figure step closer to her. You mean that? Ino witnessed his face light up, feeling the pace of her heart prance within her bosom. They continued to take an unhurried saunter back to the house, each keeping their sight away from the road ahead. Sure, it was awkward, the way the crickets chirped in their orchestra, along the blades of grass that surrounded them both. The streets were vacant save for the street lights that provided an auburn mist. Yet for once, Ino could deal with this unwieldy disposition. So what compelled you to wear that get-up? You must be thinking it's unusual because it isn't orange, right? He noted. I've never seen you dress formal, I guess. Naruto chuckled, pulling off the livid vest, dangling from his index finger. I know it's not much, but I can't watch you shiver like that. He handed her the garment, she took it without much of a protest. The small talk soon died for a moment, all that echoed was Ino's click-clacking of her high heels, abrasion against the concrete trails. Thank you, a whisper too imperceptible to catch. As their faithful apartment complex grew closer, Naruto could feel the tension grind between them. He could not accurately depict the disappointment that scurried through his senses, fogging his rationale. What was it exactly that he wanted? It was indescribable. Ino twiddled with her fingers, keeping her gaze away from him for the moment. His vest draped on her, a few sizes too big, the scent of Naruto filling her lungs. All too recognizable, in fact. Unfortunately, they did amble their way towards the porch of the house, somehow. Ino rubbed her hands together, heating her icy fingers as she sadly waited for Naruto to pull his key out. It took a few seconds to figure that staying outside was his full intention, as he maintained his position. She was too afraid to look at him, but of what she could not admit. Ino then proceeded to shove the key on the lock herself, out of pure frustration. Cool winds blew a few strands of hair away from her features. She tried to latch her hands onto the doorknob, but before she could pull the door open in its entirety, a hand shoved it away from her reach. Wait, not yet. Naruto lowered his tone, taking a few steps forward, inches away from Ino. He made a grab for her hands, forcing cold quivers along his spine. His blonde bangs covered the anxiety in his eyes, as he pulled her closer to him. He was at a loss of words, his wits stuttered, feeling quite woozy himself. I didn't give you a proper present. Breathless, his heart hammered against his chest, building up the nerves that accumulated within him. Ino held her mouth slightly agape, shocked by just how intimate they were. Once again, another attempt at controlling her blood pressure passed on instantly, her limbs began to tremble under his touch. He willingly slipped his arms under her torso, another tug brought the scent of her perfume closer. Noses practically skimming, he leaned his forehead beside hers, the resonance of his breathing pace reverberating into her ear. Lightheaded, of course, she mumbled, what? Her arms pushed into his, hands gripping onto his shoulders for support. Beautiful blue eyes searched for the meaning behind the figure in front of her, she could feel her chest swell with sentiment. A little bit of fear, a little bit of joy. Can I ask you something? He whispered hoarsely, she shuddered from his voice. The melody of crickets and owls were no longer present at this point. Impatience managed to overwhelm him, as he could not wait for her answer. Can I kiss you? His mouthful of air whisked atop of her lips, his quick breaths warming her features. The request, soft and naive, lingered through September weather. Half dazed, eyes half lidded by his eluding spell, why yes, she stuttered, holding onto her breath. He captured her lips in an innocent kiss. Ino was startled at first, moved by his gentle, wine-ridden taste. Perhaps, she could not consider this as reality. It took seconds more for her mouth to move gently against his. He slipped his hands onto her cheeks, his thumb stroking the line of her jaw, completely infatuated. They remained that way, finding warmth in one another. The chills and flutters became a rush, until Ino became the first to break their link. She panted for air, eyes widened like saucers. She could not comprehend what had just occurred, no matter how the burning of alcohol etched her mouth. Cerulean glossed orbs blinked, turning away from Naruto, as she clutched the front of his vest, scrunching silk material. Incredible was not enough to describe what had just happened. What are you so afraid of? He murmured, gently, tugging her hand. Not afraid, she replied. Before she could think of a way to avoid his remark, she found herself pulled into a tight embrace, almost to the point where her feet lifted from the ground. I'd never let anything happen to you. The solid declaration was whispered into her ear. He felt assured limbs surround him, squeezing his neck. He smiled warmly, lowering his gaze to meet her blue eyes. Don't you know, you're the most beautiful woman I know. Eyes closed, accepting the waver of affection whirling in him at the moment. Even when you get on my last nerve, Naruto admitted, concentrating on the smile that lit her features. And for once, he did not feel cheated. It was not one-sided. He could touch the love in her eyes, and its entirety. Shut up. She nuzzled her face into his chest. You mean when you get on my last nerve? He was able to hear her mumbles. Don't change, Ruto. Sure. He kissed the top of her head, simply content with being able to be himself with the girl in his arms. Happy birthday, Ino. Because that was it, that was love. Why the hell are you so enthusiastic today? Shikamaru grunted, ducking to keep from getting pierced by her kunai. Watching her parade about with a smile on her face, although it was some sort of habit, was never such when it came to her training. Today, even when they practiced with swimming, she had a jolly aura about her that was beginning to irk him. Being so cheerful in the morning, for hours on end, and never clearly explaining why, was rather bothersome. What's so wrong about that? Nothing. He sighed, with a roll of his eyes. He glimpsed at his watch, startled to see just how quickly time has progressed for the two of them. They've been at it for about 3 hours. Say Shika, what time is it? She asked curiously. 2 minutes to 8, but this damn watch is always behind a few minutes, so I never know. He admitted, tapping his fairly unreliable source of device. Shikamaru turned to meet Ino, who appeared to be rather worried. She then had her back turned to him, reaching for her jacket sprawled on the grassland. Why? Shit. I forgot. I can't believe I completely forgot. Forgot what? Damn, I have to take care of Asuma-sensei's baby today, and I was supposed to be at my mom's at 8. Your mother is crazy for thinking you'd be on time. Shut up. She shot him a threatening look, quickening her pace towards the trails, the easiest way home. Maybe you underestimate me, once again. Sure, he called out, cupping his hands, grinning. And maybe you are amazing. He joked, collapsing onto the meadow. A few chuckles escaped the now content Shikamaru, as he observed Ino retreat from the area. He wondered if she would actually make it on time. Ino panted, trying her best to catch up with her breathing. The cool climate forced a sore throat as she proceeded to pass by the mourning bystanders of Konoha. A few familiar faces cocked an interested eyebrow at watching Miss Yamanaka pass by them with a wave. Hello, goodbye, she blurted. A blonde rush scurried past them, trying to keep herself from tripping over traces of autumn leaves. She was not typically this friendly towards others, but she felt the need to greet everyone. When the outline of her parents' doorframe was drawing near, she could feel her unease build up alongside the chilly pressure. Her icy fingers clasped the doorknob, shoving it with all the force she could upsurge. I'm here, she gasped, her knees collapsing against the carpet. The warmth of the house overwhelming her, blood rushing. Ino blinked, witnessing her mother observe her in a dense manner. She perked her head forwards, placing both hands onto the ground, mouth agape to accept any and all forms of oxygen. Why, morning honey. Sapphire eyes crinkled in happiness, clutching a undersized blanket in her arms. I didn't think you would come now. You said, 8 o'clock or else. She cried out in between breaths, shooting an angry look at her mother, who continued to smile half-heartedly in her direction. Where's Asuma-sensei? Relax, and they've already left on their mission. Actually, I'm surprised you didn't catch them. She shrugged, placing the bundle into a sack. It's shocking how early you came, Ino, you night stalker. Ino flinched at her mother's ability to distinguish her change of habits. In fact, you've been doing this occasionally. Yeah, well, you said 8. Alright, I said 8, and you're here. Ino felt her mother rest her fingers onto her chin, kissing her daughter's cheek affectionately, the way only a mother could. Let's just hope you'll be this reliable as you get older. Ino snorted, a grin illuminating her features. She bowed her head. You look like you have a story to tell. Well, I'm working at it. She then beamed at her mother, ending her statement with a sly grin. Perhaps it was a woman thing, a practice between a mother and daughter, but Ino's mother acknowledged the moment of silence, and knew that when her daughter was ready, she was prepared to listen. I'm glad you came, I have to go open the shop. Here's the baby's bag. The elder Yamanaka dropped the heavy load onto Ino's lap, the weight causing her to drop onto the rugged floor. This thing is heavy. Statement ignored, Ino looked up to see her mother disappear into another room. She took another glance at the baggage dropped upon her. It was meant more for an adult's belonging than a child's, in her dearest opinion. Because the zipper was not fastened entirely, baby lotions and shampoos stuck out. Ma, how long am I going to have the baby? Her eyebrow tilted upwards. By the look of it, it was going to be a while. She retreated, this time with a stroller, you'll see. She stopped a few inches away from Ino. An infant poked from the collection of blankets wrapped around her, looking rather peaceful in her sleeping state. The appearance of the baby had Ino smiling, slightly excited. Here you go, she pulled her daughter up, placing her palms onto the handlebars. Now, you take care of her, okay Ino? I'm always here when you need me. She shooed her towards the door, watching as her daughter pushed the stroll outside the door. Alright, I love you, bye-bye. She called out, humored by the clueless look on Ino's face. The door completely shut, she turned towards her home. She'll do fine. Ino sat herself onto the edge of the bed, extending her arm towards the sleeping Naruto. She observed the way his chest rose ascended, grinning at the tired expression plastered on his face. He clutched at the pillow she placed as her replacement, snuggling into the soft fibers. Idiot, wake up, she whispered, brushing her fingers against his cornflower locks. He stirred to an extent, but did not awake. Ino, not now, he mumbled, grabbing a greater hold of the pillow. She smiled affectionately at him. Can't you shut up? Shut up, she cried out, raising her hand in the air. Yeah, shut up. He opened his eye, smirking. Damn broad. Oh yeah, her screams echoing into his ear, rousing his conscience. Well, now you're going to have to deal with 2 broads. She leaned back exposing a stroller, smirking. Huh, he pulled himself up, his eyes widening into saucers. What's that? He pointed at the carriage turned away from him. Curiosity entailed on his expression, his mouth was held agape. A baby, genius. A baby, really. A smile lit his features. He rubbed at his droopy eyes, attempting to comprehend her words. Wow. Naruto pulled the covers off of him, leaping from the bed, but before he could take a step closer, Ino hung onto the hem of his shirt, causing him to fall over from his impending charge. He crashed onto the floor, his legs becoming tangled in unnecessary blankets. Hey, listen to me, she bent over, her blonde hairs hanging from her head as she viewed him from an opposite point of view. She's a baby, Naruto. I know. He nodded, his mischievous tone arising. He wiggled his fingers, crawling over to the baby stroller. Gosh, he whispered, seating himself in front of the navy blue carriage, pushing it towards him a few more inches. She's so peaceful looking. His fingers gently rubbed against the sleeping infant's cheeks. Babies do that, you know. She made her way towards him, also seating herself on the carpet floor. I think Asuma-sensei's crazy for letting me take care of his only kid. He shifted his gaze onto Ino, eyeing the blank stare he received. I don't think so. She averted her attention towards the child enmeshed in fuzzy blankets. The child had a headful of lovely raven fuzz, thanks to her kin. Ino could understand the potential the little one attained by having two Jonin as parents. The baby slept serenely. It was almost impossible to imagine how lively they could get. "We have a baby now," he commented, his tone dropping into a near murmur. There came a waver of silence between the two of them as they both turned to stare at one another. His words were said in a manner of truth, and while she contemplated over his statement, she giggled a bit. "I'm sorta scared." "You're always scared. Life is scary," she declared. Ino regretted letting her words become incised into the atmosphere. "I know." He placed his arm around her shoulder, pulling her closer to him. She felt his body heat warm her side, feeling a bit comfortable. As if he had conjured a solution, he rotated his head in a swift fashion, sending her an assuring glance. He kissed her forehead. "Okay." He pulled away, enjoying how easy it was to make her flush. Come what may, she accepted his form of soothing, burrowing herself onto the plain white t-shirt of his. "So, what's her name?" Her face squirmed as she bit her lip. "Shoot, I forgot to ask." Naruto chuckled. "No, really. I'm not joking, damn it." She dragged her hand across her face, suddenly feeling hot. How could I forget the obvious? Don't stress, relax." He rubbed his hands together, a bit of his tongue sticking from the side of his mouth. He appeared to be in the middle of a complicated mode of thought. He tapped the temple at one side, humming an inconceivable tune. "I could call my mom. Satomi." "What? Satomi? Ah, that's a cute name. Her name is Satomi." "Are you joking?" She yanked his collar, bringing him downward onto eye level. Teeth bared, she narrowed her eyes, completely enraged by his dim-witted suggestion. "Do you seriously want to make up a name for her?" "I think it's a nice name." He spoke carelessly. Over the course of the past few months he had become acquainted with her imitation of a mad woman, and by no means took her seriously. What if she got used to that name? Kurenai and Asuma would get so pissed. Oh please, they'd never find out. He shrugged, turning towards the infant in questioning. "Unless they already call her Satomi." He rolled his eyes in a mocking manner. "Besides, what are you going to call her, baby? Wouldn't that be just as bad? In any case, Satomi is far better than baby." "You're an idiot, Naruto." He figured that was her manner of accepting his suggestion. "Yeah, Satomi Uzumaki has a nice ring to it." "Naruto. What?" He pouted, dragging his word. His shoulders slumped, as he skimmed his fingers through his locks. "It's only a joke." "It's not a joke." She stood up, brushing off the dust on her pants. That sounded so authentic. "I just hope you don't get too attached. Remember Naruto, she's Kurenai's and Asuma's child." Sure. He held a smug expression, eyes rolling. Ino relaxed against the trickles of water that trailed down her form, watching the molecule filter down towards the trail. As she turned the knob towards the right, she heaved a sigh, pleased to finally have a moment of relaxation. Her leg reached out of the shower glass, but before she stepped one foot onto the cold tiles, a baby's cry caused her to jolt from where she was, nearly tipping over. She too cried out in surprise, quickly grabbing hold of the towel. Her initial thought, while wild and extreme on its own, consisted of some of course dim-witted move from the future Hokage. Without much of an effort of tying the towel against her bosom, covering a part of her body as she pushed the door away, wet feet stepping onto the hallway. "Naruto, what are you doing? I told you not to walk her up." And she woke up. Course she did. She was bound to wake up by the rattling Naruto was doing, because the guy could no longer contain himself. Going against Ino's regulations, he poked at the infant's tummy, keeping himself in Ino's room for a few minutes more. Okay. So he made a cheap move. He lingered on leisurely until Ino left to the bathroom, but it was worth it, he believed. "Dumb, fucking, idiot," she mumbled incoherency, shoving the door in front of her open. hearing the angry door crash onto the wall with a thud creaking back in her direction before she marched into the room, in a towel class fashion. Her finger raised, a nice slap was in order, but once she approached him, she saw the baby in his arms, clumped in an inexperienced way. He struggled to hold onto the little one, making a nervous squirm for Satomi, as he so willingly named her. Ino tried not to smile, but it was difficult to ignore the complicated way he was trying to hold the baby, who only blinked at her new caretakers. Like this, Naruto, look. She held onto his arm, pulling it so that he held Satomi's back, adjusting her against his chest. A sigh of relief left him. He peered down at the infant, and Ino too could not restrain from admiring the little one. God, her eyes are beautiful. Ino whispered, seeing the clear crisp crimson tint gloss Satomi's eyes. She definitely got that from Kurenai. Yeah, Satomi's really pretty, ain't she? Aren't you? He turned, his nose pressing against the soft cheek of the baby. She only stared, wide-eyed, curiosity to its fullest extent, intrigued by the interest in the sapphire eyes. She's sort of quiet, Ino stated, taking a hold of the smooth tiny fingers in her palm. Look. Hi, little, she shot Naruto a knowing glance. Satomi, she said in defeat, her voice returning to baby talk, you're so cute with your big cherry-colored eyes, your mommy and daddy are sure stupid for letting Naruto and I take care of precious little you. Hey, Naruto spoke defensively, pulling Satomi away, we're good parents, I think. Perhaps, having the child around was not going to be the best idea around. By the way he narrowed his glare, Ino could evidently pinpoint his unexpected attachment to the child. And what she thought would be a day full of protest of caring for Satomi she believed was going to be the complete opposite at this rate. If you say so. Ino spoke, unconvinced, leaving the room. At the very least, she was not going to be the only one dealing with her, even if they both did not quite know what to do. And they're past their day, both situating their attention towards Kurenai's and Asuma's kin. Look at her, she can stand up. Ah, she's smiling Ino. Satomi looky here, she's so cute. Naruto, that pacifier is not for you. Admiring her so. So what do you think? You can't function or something? He spoke in a murmur, behind Satomi's back, eyes lingering to pull at the carpet strings they all laid upon. His words were in such a casual manner, taking Ino a while to register his exact intentions. Function. Do you believe in yourself? What are you talking about? Her effort to remain calm wore thin, her tone rose with each passing word. In an attempt to keep herself occupied, she rattled the toy was fixated between her digits, enjoying its deafening effect. She kept her gaze towards Kurenai's child, who continued to bite onto the teddy bear that was given to her. Luckily, Satomi became the wall of evasion. Of course I do. Why do you always doubt yourself? I do not doubt myself. You never think you can do anything, actually. I bet that's why you're afraid to be a kunoichi, again. You don't think you can do it. What the hell are you talking about? You're always so insecure about yourself. Are you serious? She jerked her arm, no longer interested in the plaything she was holding. Biting onto her lip, the absolute fury that was building into her was held in restraint, the only face it did receive was the ringing of the fists. She shifted her eyes back onto Satomi, wiggling the infant's arm. Boy, that Naruto, he's sure crazy. He doesn't even know what he's talking about, right Satomi? Small crimson eyes were too engaged in the texture of the teddy to return any sort of acknowledge. Naruto softly clasped his hand onto Ino's, and you don't really trust me either, because of it. The cerulean tint in her eyes glazed over, Ino squirmed her face, turning away from him. So what? Do you trust me full-heartedly? She spoke sarcastically. I don't have to think twice. And what? What are you supposed to say? That you believe in me? She turned to stare at him, eyes squinting. Course I do, without a doubt. Her eyes widened, not expecting such a rapid reply. For the next few seconds, silence thickened the atmosphere, save for the coos and chuckles of a naive adolescent now grabbing for the abandoned rattle. Naruto pulled himself up, dragging himself across the carpet floor, passing the baby. He became the first to grab a hold of Ino's limb, pulling her towards him, not caring whether she fought against him. She felt herself become pressed onto his torso, the beats of his heart becoming a melody to her. Hey, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, he cradled her frame, fighting against the flutters that danced amidst his abdomen, but I'm sorta crazy about you. Ino chuckled, somewhere between laughter and tears. Her eyes watered, feeling foolish and at ease all the same. Sorta. Huh. No, actually completely. He kissed her, in an abrupt fashion, warm lips brushing over her mouth. Something dangerously longing in him. His arm tucked behind her middle section, to balance her from behind, before her head would thump against the surface. Ino felt herself relax, smitten with the way he affectionately kissed her, eyes closed. She found her arm looping around his neck, pulling him closer as she returned his gesture. Her nerves shuddered from inside her as she felt his weight pressed onto her. There came a struggle, as the two attempted to lean onto the rim of the couch, all in a blind approach. Ino tugged at a fistful of golden hairs, feeling the smooth fluffs entangled between her digits. Naruto pulled away from her kiss-swollen lips, still sensing the anxiety purge. I love you, Ino blurted out. Sightless from the whirl of unexplainable emotions that jittered inside, she was surprised just how effortless it was to admit those three simple words. Blue eyes were half-lidded, chin up to take a glance at the male figure in front of her. He seemed dazed for a moment, his shoulders slumped. There was maturity in his gaze as he pushed forward for one last kiss on her cheek. Idiot, she mumbled, both breaking out into a few laughs to fill in the awkward silence. Ino, honey, idiot does not mean sweetheart. He tried to pull onto the figure in front of him, as he always did. He had a thing for waking her up in the middle of the night, so he could bother her, even for a minute. By the way Ino would always fidget and groan, he knew she'd give him a good kick and shove. Which was why, when he reached for her torso, all he could grasp was a pillow in front of him. Now fully conscious, he rubbed at his eyes, pulling at the sheets to find nothing but a few pillows awaiting him. Naruto sighed, squinting his eyes to catch a clearer vision. He was surprised to see Ino embracing the small child in her arms, her back pressed against the wall. A tired expression graced her features, as she focused on the soft snort of the baby, a weak smile laced upon her lips. You look a little tired. Yeah, well, she wouldn't stop crying. Ino continued to soothe the infant, her fingers tracing along her black hairs. Satomi, right, a sarcastic, weary chuckle left her. I didn't hear her cry. Naruto cocked an eyebrow, scratching lazily at the back of his head. Are you sure? Sure, I'm sure. Why do you think I woke up? She defended, bringing the bundles of blankets closer to her bosom. Okay. He observed the way Ino swayed with Kurenai's child, and understood the lie pretty well. The first thing he wanted to say was, Naruto, you sly dog, but perhaps that was a little too much, especially since the boy was asleep. But he had to admit, damn, that boy actually had him feeling proud to raise him, sort of. So as Jiraiya continued to observe the way Naruto clung onto the sleeping girl in his arms, he could not help but feel the urge to cry out in pompous manner, which in fact he eventually actually did. He clenched his fists, struggling to keep quiet, he felt his teeth grind. Of course, he had to visit the kid. It's been a few months, as usual, and his little tryst of women research was actually on hiatus, to be frank. He thought, since he was already in Konoha he might as well see that brat the fourth left him. After all, he was a bit concerned over him. Honestly, all Naruto would do is pout over some girl named Sakura, Tsunade's apprentice. Well, from what he can see, he sure got over that. And so, this fairly explained his pure enthusiasm for the boy. Yo, I'd never thought I'd see the day, ha. He stepped into the bedroom, a happy grin heightening his pleased attitude. Naruto grunted, lifting his hand to flick at the bug that he believed was becoming quite a nuisance. His eyes remained shut, as he nuzzled himself into the end collar of Ino's nightshirt. It's too late for that, kid, wake up. Jiraiya shook the boy's shoulder, disinterested with the idea of sleep. Wah! Sapphire Eyes made an effort to peer at the person behind him, when he finally took notice of the infamous white hairs that made up of the one and only, Arrow Sennin. He sighed, doubting that it was in fact the Toad Hermit was practically leering over him. It took a few seconds for the certainty to click inside his intellect, as he recoiled at the idea of Jiraiya finally finding him. He sat up in a sad effort to keep from stirring Ino awake. Arrow Sennin, don't call me that, boy. Shish. He placed his fingers atop his mouth, a worried expression now plastered. Really? He had hoped that this guy wouldn't have had to pop up for at least a few weeks more. Please, Arrow, she's sleeping. He frowned, yet Jiraiya remained unimpressed by Naruto's plea. Who's that? He placed his foot on the edge of the bed, leaning his elbow on his knee, facing Naruto arrogantly. A friend? What the hell are you doing here? I've never seen her before. She's actually cute, Naruto. How do you manage? Get out of here. Huh, hey, where's that Sakura who you always obsessed with? He chuckled before adding, she wasn't any good for you anyway. Rose red etched onto Naruto's cheek. He lowered his gaze. About that, confession sounded like a good idea right about now. He frowned, feeling the guilt linger in his empty stomach, but his explanation came to halt when he caught Ino sitting herself. His heart pounded, a sudden rush came through as he wondered if she overheard him. Who's that? Ino pointed, blinking. Her blonde hairs meshed every which way, but she did not seem to mind. The hermit darted his gaze from Naruto. There was a threatening sentiment behind the glance. He shuddered at the thought that Jiraiya did not exactly ignore his last words. The feeling worsened at the joyful greeting that followed. Why hello there. He smiled at Ino, making a grab for her palm, which he then kissed. She only rubbed at her eyes, still unbeknownst to what exactly was occurring. Jiraiya's the name, also known as the Great Toad Hermit. She giggled at his silly manner of speaking, and shook his hand. Naruto watched the linking of hands, and grew suspicious of the Arrow Sennin. As much as he wished the Turtle Hermit would only stay for a moment or two, he was well aware of the man's charm, the tendency to entice attractive girls. He inherited most of the Jiraiya's qualities, after all. Each time he found Jiraiya passing him a glance, his eyes boring into his skin. It was enough to have him trembling all day. At this point, he recognized the disappointment running through him, and his conscience was not at all of aid to him. His eyes trailed down to Satomi, who reached curiously for a rag that was at close reach for her. In her closed corners, the playpen that they managed to arrange, she placed any and all attention towards the orange table rag that hung loosely from the oven handle bars. As tempted as he was to grab hold of Satomi, and press all of his oncoming frustration into a smothering embrace, he forced himself to focus on Ino. She only sipped idly onto her teacup filled with coffee, captivated by Jiraiya's exaggerations. Jiraiya took another swallow of his sake, surprised to know that the boy had a few of his favorite brands right in the house. Naruto, he lifted the glass in his direction. Since when did you take up drinking? Since you left, he stated, tiredly. His elbow rested atop of the counter, across from the two, his chin laying on his palm. He had hoped that Jiraiya would take the hint, but the man happened to be disregarding any sort of gesture. Aha! You know you can't hold your liquor, boy. The Toad Hermit banged his fist onto the table, followed by a horde of cackles. Ino took a glimpse at Naruto. Watching him fluster was all too much for her to take, as she too joined the Sannin into hysterics. Directing his attention to Ino, he said, one day he was begging for it, Miss Yamanaka, and when I actually did give in to handing him one cup of sake he threw up an hour later. Ino grinned. Naruto could feel himself growing annoyed at the two of them. Ino and Jiraiya have been behaving close to two school girls in a class reunion. Ah, but that was long ago. I guess the boy did hold some immunity to the alcohol. Naruto drummed his fingers on the surface, witnessing the pen dance in front of his eyes. He had forgotten how it felt to be the class clown, and had hoped to never return to that state again. That's funny. At the very least, I'm not a staggering drunk. He watched Ino cough up her coffee, bringing the napkin to her lips as her glare darted in his direction. She was not amused. Oh, Jiraiya cocked an eyebrow. Ino here can't last much either. It was now his turn to take into the mirth with the arrow senin. Ino wrung her fists, pushing the cup away. Hardy, har, har. Her eyes rolled. At least I don't dance like a hooligan. Do not. Naruto cried out, his face reddening. He dances. I didn't know. That's a surprise. The kid can't stop the beat. She jumped from her chair, carrying out a short hip-swinging performance. And oh boy, don't even get me started on his singing. He sings too. Jiraiya's face lit up, practically absorbed with the idea of the boy prancing around. The toad hermit then ran his fingers through his pallid locks, his cackles echoing through the four walls of the kitchen, ringing in Naruto's ears. Yeah, when I first met him he was singing this song, I forget what it's called. Oh yeah, at least I can swim. Naruto received a threatening glare. Ino stepped, no stomp towards him, although she was a few inches shorter than the tall future Hokage. She undeniably made her presence known. Eyes narrowing, she gritted her teeth, only a few centimeters away by now. I too can swim. So then why'd I have to hold your hand the whole way, You don't know the half of it. At least I don't drool at night. His jaw dropped, finding that all their secrets were being spilt in front of Jiraiya like a deck of cards. 52 card pickup. And the man only soaked up what he could, slapping his knee as he attempted to catch his breath. Any heap of dignity that he had managed to develop after Jiraiya crumbled before him. He was not going to go down so easily, and definitely not alone. You should be the one to talk. I don't have phobias for days. Alright, that's enough. Jiraiya could distinguish the electricity flowing between them, and he was not akin to watching a thunderstorm develop in his witness. Holding his hands out, he pulled them back a few inches apart, but it failed to make any progress. I don't try to pick up a girl by a lousy favor. Oh alright, put up a guard, like you always do. Okay. Jiraiya shouted into Naruto's ear, the boy cringing from the defining bellow, taking a few steps back from them both. Ino kept herself from completely lunging at him, puffs of breaths escaping her parted lips. The more she stared at him, the angrier she became. So what did he mean by that? She thought, fucking prick. The Sannin swallowed the portion of sake that managed to settle in his mouth, feeling the alcohol tingle at his midsection. When he turned to check on Ino, he could see Tsunade's livid anger pouring out from her, and became officially alarmed. The girl was a nut, he concluded, as much as a nut as Naruto. Alright, tension I see. He sighed heavily, figuring that Naruto was not at all happy either. He then faced Naruto, relax. For the oddest reason, he felt the Kyuubi's energy waver through him, and realized that they both hit a few unwanted chords. Both of you are crazy, the toad hermit rubbed at his chin, eyes closing. Crazy kids, getting riled up over a bunch of nonsense. Mumbling, he then strolled over to Satomi, opting to pick her up. Ino and Naruto stood at their post, two pairs of blue eyes watching the way Jiraiya held the baby in the air, who only giggled and mused over the Sannin. It left an uncomfortable sentiment to smog over the two of them. Naruto held a shaky gaze towards Ino, who focused on the patterns of the table rag. He shifted uncomfortably, rubbing at his elbow the way he would do when Kakashi used to tell him he was not enduring his chakra well. He started. His words lingered through the dense atmosphere, over the multitude of goo-goos and gaw-gaws of baby talk. Like that you have irrational fears, he paused before adding, they show that you're vulnerable. He expected idiot, but didn't receive the insult. Comment. The frustration was now wiped from her expression, a smile playing upon her lips. He found himself satisfied, wanting to make her laugh, perhaps. The two became immersed in one another, lost in silent banter, by the silly faces Naruto would make and the equally silly efforts Ino had to keep from giggling. Of course, all of it was channeled towards Jiraiya, whom seconds later laid a suspicious glance in their direction, to find the two jolt into pseudo-daydreaming. Aha, I guess it didn't take long for you two to make up. He placed Satomi back onto the crib. Well, he shouted, finishing his drawl with a yawn, stretching his arms towards the ceiling. I guess it's about time I leave, but before I go, the arrow Sennin stepped towards Ino, taking a hold of her wrist. I'd like to ask if you'd give me the pleasure. Naruto's ears twitched, knowing the recognizable change in his tone, of using you as a reference to my next novel. Ino, whom obviously knew nothing of the Ika Ika Paradise series, beamed at him, nodding her head happily. She's not interested. Can you leave now? Naruto pulled Jiraiya away from her, pushing him towards the door. Yes, I am interested. Don't listen to Naruto. Ino rolled her eyes, watching the toad hermit be escorted by the blonde. Jiraiya only turned to wave a pleasant goodbye to Ino, before having the door slammed by Naruto. Congratulations Ino, you've now been officially included into Arrow Sennin's adult book. He crossed his arms. She cocked an eyebrow, scratching at her ear. Exactly, you didn't have to slam the door in his face, stupid. She walked past him, averting her attention to Satomi, who reached her arms out for Ino. Do you understand what I'm saying? An adult novel, as in Kakashi-sensei being the only one reading that junk. Don't say that about your sensei. Ino had her back turned to him, fixated in a game of peek-a-boo. As in, you have to be older than 17 to take a glimpse at it. The loud-mouthed ninja watched the aura of content drastically change to worry, even from behind. As in, he finished with a grin, XXX. Her posture stiffened, and before he could feel even an ounce of guilt, she was already at the door, her fingers running through the many different locks that she had, all the while Satomi stared wide-eyed at her insane caretaker. He better not be within walking distance. She growled, finishing the last few locks. Geez, why the hell do we have so many? I don't know, Naruto whistled, finding this all amusing to the utmost extent. You're the one who bought all that security crap. Yeah, well, whatever. Sure. Nice comeback, Ino. She forced the door to swing violently open. It crept a few inches forward anyhow. The wild look splashed upon her features now disappeared, followed by shock. Hi. Blood rushed under her eyes, her face flushing at the person in front of her. Curious, Naruto leaned in front of her. He too went into a sputtering speech. Miss Yamanaka, why I didn't expect you to be here. Uruka scratched nervously at the back of his neck. Perhaps I have the wrong house. Do you happen to know where Naruto? His russet orbs shifted downward, towards the clueless-looking guy. For that split moment between the three of them, there came a defiant truth. Something was up, and it was now time to face the music. Uruka chuckled, oddly concerned for what exactly have those two been up to by the way they appeared to be startled. Uruka-sensei. It's been weeks, months since he last seen Uruka, and since he's been at the Ichiraku ramen bar. He trapped his former sensei in a bear hug, and Uruka could remember the small noisy student whom he had to look down upon now stand at his exact proportionate. Naruto. He patted the boy's back. Ino observed the way Uruka had his eyes shut tight and noted at the idea of a father-son reunion occurring before her. Ino felt the standards of a regular woman hit her hard when she realized she could not cook a thing for her old sensei. He did not mind very much, and was happy with a bowl of noodle soup Naruto made for them both, yet she felt somewhat useless in the cooking department, a much feminine feature, or so she was made to believe. For a child of only a few months, Satomi was very quiet. Not a very fussy child, she oftentimes kept to herself when Naruto and Ino found themselves in another dispute, for lack of better words. As she held Satomi, watching her hold her own bottle of baby formula, her felt the flutters the way a mother would feel when she watched her child fall asleep. So, Ino, Uruka coughed, the taste of ramen was clear, is she yours? In a both nervous and unhopeful manner, he turned to Naruto, still not being able to put two and two together. Oh no. Ino laughed loudly, nervously. She isn't mine, I'm only babysitting for Asuma-sensei. Ah, I figured, she did look familiar. He nodded, consciously sighing with relief. He knew Ino was not that sort of girl, and certainly not with having Inoichi as a father. So I know it might be a little impolite, but are you two? Uruka pointed at both Ino and Naruto, his index and thumb clicking together as a mocking expression laced onto his features. Naruto sighed, turning to look at Ino, who kept her mouth, and only widened her sapphire eyes. A half-hearted giggle left her, and she felt a firm tie of flutters flurry in her abdomen. Oh no, her eyes closed, tipping her head to the side, we're just friends, that's about it. I needed a place to stay, she was nice enough to give me a room. He spoke, less enthusiastic but still grasping the smile that tucked his lips. He finished his bowl, placing it atop of Naruto's empty one. Uruka went so far as to put a believable assurance to them both. He stood up, clasping his hands together as he passed Naruto, walking from the kitchen where Jiraiya once stood, now to the living room. He rotated his head onto the hallway, his eyes skimming to count two common-sized rooms, which he presumed to be a bedroom as well as bathroom, and a thin door at the end of the foyer, possibly a closet. Right. He grinned, the way Naruto would often do when he had something up his sleeve. Uruka walked casually, even to go as far as to have his hands behind his back, strolling a few steps closer into the lounge. Roommate so where's your room, Naruto? Here. He tapped his fingers on the couch. Somewhere along his response came a sure, or a yeah, but neither Ino nor Naruto could remember. They both felt the wit of Uruka weigh on them both, and the interrogation only started. Ooh, Uruka responded, loudly. His understanding statement echoing into the hallway. He went as far as to nod a few times. You understand that you're not really impressing me with your lies, right? He snorted, lowering his gaze onto the sofa, patting it. This doesn't even appear to be comfortable. That's what I told her. But no, Uruka-sensei, the woman doesn't listen. I knew I wasn't the only one. Naruto broke out into a strident protest. Ino gave out a defeated sigh, turning to the side, as she scratched the hairs above her ear. And although a smack to the head was definitely in order, Uruka was just amazed at how easy it was to admit it, without much of effort. He could only laugh to himself, finding the dumbfounded look on Ino's pretty face just as amusing. Well, I knew that wouldn't work. Ino darted her glare towards Naruto, who, in spite of being the fault of all this, joined Uruka in his fit of chuckles. Uruka could hint Ino relaxing her stance, and ceased with his humor. Well, that was interesting, he nodded, stretching at his arms, and amusing all the same, but I believe I've had my share of fun for today. It was insane, watching two of his students grow at both heights and intellects, not to mention the affection he could see between them. He would have never guessed it, but when it comes to the impulsive, Naruto and Ino were quite proficient in that area. This was nice, with the screaming and yelling, I rather miss that. He took a glance at the ceiling, lost in memories of scolding at them both when they were much younger, because after all, they were still children in his eyes. With a peace sign and a smile, Uruka had left the house behind him, into the gentle gusts of autumn wind blowing into his brunette hairs that hung from the hair tie. Ino watched him leave, until the body of a man turned into something consisted with that of a shadow. That's weird, 2 visitors in one day. Weird. It's like the ghosts of Christmas past. Next thing I'll know, Kakashi-sensei would show up. And he wouldn't knock or barge in like those two, he'd poof in here. Ino huffed a short chuckle. Ino almost expected for her folks to come on by, just like Naruto's fathers. Maybe Naruto was an orphan, but for an orphan he had a lot of fathers that cared for him so. But then again, the idea of Inoichi swinging on by was not at all entertaining. That would mean she'd have to explain it all. And as the saying goes, everything is everything. So she'll yell at him, so what? Naruto could feel himself drifting off, the television becoming some sort of zombie portal to him. He adjusted himself on the couch, feeling the pressure on his chest where Satomi rested. That was all too easy, he winded in his thoughts, somewhere in and out of his conscious. His eyes fluttered, catching a gist of the cops that hauled away the prisoner on the screen. He draped a protective arm over the infant, feeling her snuggle into his torso. Cute kid, he mumbled, feeling the haze of sleep overwhelming him. I wouldn't drop you. There came no reply, but he already acknowledged the solitude. Ino went out for what? He did not really know. She only mumbled a few things before running out of the door. Ino doesn't know what she's talking about. His neck rotated, glancing at the pale ceiling. He blinked leisurely, counting the hanging portraits that were situated near the wall. 1, 2, 5. I hate that one. Why the hell does she still have that one up there? He thought, sucking at his teeth with the idea of the smaller Naruto staring back at him, with his trademark smile across his face. Somewhere behind him a click was heard. He figured it was Ino in her lame attempt at coming into the house quietly, but was too tired to greet her. He blinked, again and again, until he merely squinted, losing his awareness as the grasp against the child was now held with less pressure. His free hand dropped onto the soft fabric of the rug, the thump causing him to stir awake one last time. In which he was greeted with 2 sapphire orbs, a piercing hue that left him startled. He cried out, widening his glare at the man who held 2 fingers onto his neck, what in? Move an inch, and you'll be left for dead. Inoichi narrowed his livid stare, pressing his fingers onto Naruto's neck. The younger ninja quickened his breathing, completely speechless. He gulped, feeling the accumulated saliva slip into his throat. Much to his dismay, Inoichi only snarled, gritting his teeth. Unbelievable, the way his heart hammered in his chest. He shivered at him, feeling the sweat beginning to amass on his forehead. He could have spotted him, he should have spotted him, and Kakashi-sensei would only scold him for being so dense. Damn it. What are you going to do? Naruto tried to keep his composure. He could feel the paper texture rubbing against his skin, and acknowledge the warning. Any sudden movements and the focal artery on his neck would be spurting out blood. Genius, he'd note, if he was not in such a predicament. What are you doing here? A tone so dark and murky. Where's Ino? I wish I knew where she was. God, please, somewhere, if you exist. No, I know you exist. Save a poor worthless son of a gun. It was times like these in which his wit would make up for the lack of nerves. You better have not done anything to her. Daddy. A voice cut off the monster tone from the well-respected Konoha citizen, the hint of crimson in his eyes softened, into which a father was reborn. Ino. Inoichi proceeded to ignore Naruto, turning to see his tipping to the side to balance the bags that dangled from her pinky. She tried to appear as ecstatic as he was, but failed by expression alone. Naruto's head poked from the couch, a look of horror painted over his face. Ino gulped through her false smile, hoping that her father had not done anything insane yet. Inoichi hauled her into a strong hug, brushing her hair with his hands. What felt like a month of separation was in fact only among 2 days or so. Honey, how are you? Great. Ino curled the ends of her mouth into a grin. Her bags were dropped, the lack of oxygen suffocating her so. Oh, he responded, dumbfounded. He loosened his grip, pulling to stare at his feminine replication. Sorry. He angled his head to the side, a sweet smile gracing his handsome features. So who's that? Inoichi nudged his neck, his eyes rolled with the gesture. Ah, Ino chuckled, loudly. She waved her hand, so as to brush the topic off, but her father only curved his eyebrow. He's Naruto, Daddy. Yes, I know that. The Kyuubi container, but what is he doing here? Naruto slumped his shoulders, his backside thumping against the cushion of the couch. He sighed, blowing at his bangs. He already recognized this because he had to live through this his whole life. As much as he wished for people to see him without the association of the demon fox, he knew he could only keep wishing. And he felt sick. The same nausea poured over him like honey, into his abdomen, seeping into his conscience. He lived by that label, and now he was going to have to watch Ino laugh it off. Sure, laugh it off, and pretend that nothing ever happened. Pretending did not work with his former senseis. He knew more than anyone that Jiraiya and Iruka were far more clever than they had led to believe. It made him wonder if she was embarrassed to be with him. She glanced back and forth between the couch and her father before facing the fine fibers of the floor herself. Her fingers laced into a tight knot, a nervous habit that has yet to be laid to rest. Ino felt her father's blistering stare run her down, burning her face. A sigh left her, lingering into the atmosphere. It took one last moment for her to adjust the frown forming on her face, into a daring smirk. Daddy, a brilliant smile, she pulled her knotted fingers out, cracking the air between her knuckles, leaning on her father's side, he's my boyfriend. At instinct, Naruto tumbled from the couch, taken aback by her words. He left Satomi resting at the edge of the sofa, practically tripping over his legs to get himself to stand. She's crazy, don't listen to her. He cried out, sapphire orbs glazed by the sudden emotion dashing in his chest. His smile widened, as he practically collapsed onto her open arms, his knees crashing onto the floor. He buried his face into her abdomen, hugging her hips for balance. The sudden impulse to shed tears rushing at him, piercing him like bullets. It was a sickly good feeling, an awfully admirable, intense, sentiment that loomed into his chest, swelling his heart. Crazy, she's crazy, I'm crazy, we're crazy, he mumbled, feeling Ino run her fingers through his hair. Don't believe it a bit, sir. I couldn't tell you how much I loved her even if I tried. His sight was sealed, he held the girl in his arms pretty well. Ino only snickered, no longer concerned for the way others had thought about her or Naruto. She felt liberated, she felt free. It was release, and she was just happy. Love tingled all the way down. Oh, Inoichi said in a tone that brought shivers down the younger man's neck. He placed his hands on his hips, bending over to look Naruto in the eye. Eyebrow cocked, a clueless expression played upon Inoichi's handsome features. Naruto gulped. The accumulated saliva was not enough to rid of the lump that had welled in his throat. His fingers dug deep onto the cotton of Ino's shirt, tugging the clothing on her as a signal. I'm scared, the gesture announced, absolutely out of my wits' end. Naruto observed the piercing lively orbs that stared back, a bright cerulean hue that had him fixated on finding his blue reflection. Crazy, Inoichi spoke once more, his broad, stable voice lingering into the air. It was difficult to indicate whether the man was peeved or only teasing. Ino bit her mouth, feeling the pinch as a relief from the anxiety. Although she knew her father was eyeing Naruto at her navel, her mere assumption of his reaction was enough to make her wish she was 12 years old again. She wondered if Naruto could feel it, by the way he clung to her, the way her knees were shaking. Yeah, Naruto muttered, a stressed chuckle drifting into the atmosphere. He felt himself shrink before the great Jonin. But before the expected violence commenced, the elder threw his head back in laughter. Inoichi's cackles bounced against the walls, nearly shattering the teenager's eardrum. Smart answer, kid. Inoichi's palm hovered over Naruto, who immediately flinched. With his eyes tightly shut, Naruto could not see what Inoichi's hand was doing. He instantly grew tense as the other mon's hand made contact with him, and it took a few pats on his head for him to realize the older man's reaction. Really? Ino arched an eyebrow. You're not Ma. Course not. Inoichi grinned, teeth showing. Standing tall once again, he embraced her as he felt her shoulders relax. Ino, I'd never be mad. I was only joking. I didn't think the boy would be so easily upset. Naruto felt the air forced out of him. His cries of help were muffled in what little breathing space he had. Easily upset, he thought. That was an absolute death threat. But didn't you always push for Shika? Inoichi's ears twitched at the sound of the other Jonin, Ino's old Team 10 member. Ah no. Inoichi waved his arm, rolling his eyes. That's your mother, Ino. She's a total nutcase. Finally, he pulled away, turning his attention to Naruto. So, are you going to cling to her all day? Naruto loosened his hold on Ino, his hands pushing against the floor to help him stand. In all actuality, Naruto was now the tallest out of the rookie 9. This was truth he held to the boldest extent, always finding time to mock Sasuke for it, who happened to be a fourth of a centimeter shorter. That did not matter to Naruto, who remained infatuated with the idea of being taller than anyone of his peers. So as he rose, it came to the greatest disappointment that her father stood a good 2 inches taller than he. I guess I haven't really introduced myself properly. He cried out, an octave too loudly, offering his wavering hand. The edges of his broad smile twitched uncontrollably, and he felt sweat begin to build up in his palm. Inoichi smirked, grabbing onto the hand. It was a few shakes later in when he felt the twinge of his bones popping, and it took all the will in the world to ignore his newly crushed fingers in Ino's father's firm hand. He shifted his gaze towards Ino, who had clasped her hands together, too pleased with her father to acknowledge his phoniness. Ah, so how has the baby been treating you? Inoichi asked, releasing the solid grip on Naruto's hand, leaving the younger boy trying not to wince. Actually, she's really quiet, we haven't had much of a problem with her. Ino smiled, glancing at the sleeping child. That's always good, he chuckled, walking over to the child. But it's about time to say goodbye. What? Naruto exclaimed. Ino widened her eyes. Yeah, Inoichi settled the child in his arms. Her parents arrived this morning. They were a bit exhausted, so I offered to come by. Right now, Inoichi watched the frown form on Ino's face. Yes, Inoichi replied, the grin on his face turning into a frown. But, no one even told us. He sighed, walking towards the carriage. I thought I was doing you a favor, Ino, he said, his fingers fastened onto the plastic handle. Naruto and Ino were silenced by the idea of having Satomi taken from them. The clicks and snaps of Satomi being strapped echoed against the walls, ringing in Naruto's ears. It was a depressing sight, and as much as he believed the infant had her annoyances, it was strange to have her leave. We could have dropped her off at Asuma Sensei's, mumbled Ino, observing the way her father lifted the carriage. Satomi was caught amidst one of her afternoon naps, snuggling into her padded carriage. Ah, she quickly snapped, her index finger lifted, you're right. Phew. Glad that job is over. She made a gesture with her wrist, gliding it across her forehead. Glad you see it that way. Inoichi reached over to kiss his daughter's cheek before adding, Ino, don't let yourself get so caught up, I'm sure Asuma and Kurenai will have plenty of missions in the future. Her father smiled one last time, his back towards the two as he headed towards the door. As much as Ino wanted to follow her father, she allowed herself to become comforted by his preceding words. It was Naruto who dashed forward, grabbing onto the door before it would click against the lock. Wait, he shouted, into the ear of Inoichi, who cringed by the sudden yelp. You forgot this. He pulled the strap that hung from his shoulders. The Jonin received the baby bag, nodding his head. Nice, he replied. He leaned forward, his friendly tone disappearing as if it never existed. Believe me, I wouldn't have hesitated, and as Naruto instinctively lifted his head for a loud quip of some sort, a retort, or even to go as low as an acceptance to his challenge, the man vanished before his very eyes. A true ninja indeed. What awaited before the open door consisted of fallen tree leaves, leaking the autumn shades. Oh yeah, we'll see about that. He shouted at nothing in particular, fist pumping in midair. His foot flicked the end of the door, hearing it shut with a simple click. Naruto slapped his hands together, simply pleased with himself. Crazy man, he mumbled under his breath. A grin marked his lips. But we have the place all to ourselves. You know what that means. He lifted his head, witnessing Ino situated on the couch. Her hair was tied on a messy bun, with a few fair-haired locks in disarray. She hugged her knees towards her chest, her mouth hovering above her kneecaps. It was a strange sight, he noted, on how easy it was for her to be beautiful, without even trying. She nuzzled her temple further into the cloth of her pants, her face hidden between her crossed arms. You know it's funny, in the beginning I didn't want her here. I would have been happy with her gone, but now, I wish she could have stayed longer. Yeah, I know. He plopped himself beside her, his arms suddenly resting against her shoulders. We'll be the first to volunteer, alright. That is, if we don't have to do missions. Oh wait, I meant when I don't have to do a mission. Shut up, she snapped, raising her head. Rolling her eyes, she playfully punched his side. I figured it'd be that way. I haven't had a mission for months, I suppose I'm on the waiting list. Yeah, he drawled, but don't you worry, I've been pestering Granny Tsunade long enough, and she promised to put us both on my next A rank. Really? Course. He pressed his cheek against her knee. I'm just hoping your dad doesn't kill me before then. My father's just worried about me, she assured him. He's a nice guy, really. Yeah, I guess, he said flatly, completely unconvinced. Autumn was in early bloom, by the way Ino observed the leaves blend into the multitude of auburn and ginger. She found herself absorbed by the decorations of nature, the vivid hues among the trees ahead of her. She tugged her scarf, her bracelet dancing with motion. It clacked against her skin, alongside the layers of shirts and jackets she managed to pull on this morning. She frowned, believing she overdressed for a surprisingly warm day of September. So, are you going to enlighten me anytime soon? Naruto brought his palm towards his mouth, coughing to crack her distraction. Ah, I wasn't out of it for long. She pushed him lightly, her fingers probing for his arm. And no, it's a surprise. The mere thought of their destination had her heart pounding. A nervous chuckle left her, she tightened her fingers against his warm palm. They continued to stroll leisurely through the backwoods, their legs treading through the small heaps of accumulated leaves. This looks familiar, he observed, surprised by her sudden anxiety. I'm guessing we're heading towards the riverside. Ino breathed deeply, her hands beginning to jitter. She believed Sakura was already waiting for her. She could picture it now, Sakura with an impatient expression, tapping her foot against the wooden docks. Her rosy hair already tied in a small braid, a few short hairs sticking out on the back. What she could not picture was whether Sakura had already stripped herself off of her clothes and would be waiting with her bathing suit. The weather called for the occasion, at the very least. Well, she can have the medical nin waiting for too long, right? A few bushes covered the entrance to the pond. Ino, who remained too restless to wait, pulled away from Naruto's hold. She ran from him, trotting past the bushes. Naruto paused, jamming his hands into his pockets as he watched Ino leave. Geez, what's gotten into you? He shook his head, biting off a grin that sought to cover his face. Ino halted from her sudden dash, bringing out her arms to press herself against the railing. The current tugged the scarf loosely from her shoulders as it danced in the wind. You actually showed up. Sakura beamed, and just as Ino predicted, a bikini top was exposed under her open jacket. Course I did. I'm here for the free meal, and to kick your ass. Yeah, Sakura sucked her teeth, engrossed in her sarcasm. I'd be a good day if you didn't drown. You wish. Ino grinned cheesily, grabbing onto Sakura's hand. Something about Sakura's behavior swayed Ino's silliness. Ino laughed, loudly and obnoxiously, fueled by the irritated expression her friend gave her. Sakura held her mouth agape, prepared to question Ino's sudden goofiness when something caught the side her eye. She lifted her head, ignoring her friend's ridiculous conduct. She suddenly smiled, yanking her limb from Ino's grip, as she charged towards the teenager who appeared to have waited for her. Ino held her grin, as she casually leaned to the side. Her arrogance had her practically egotistical. It was when she saw exactly who Sakura was running towards was when she quickly finished her mockery. Naruto flicked at the twig that stuck into the fabric of his jacket. He squinted his gaze, raising his arm to wave Ino over, but she appeared to be occupied with some sort of furry. He paused, his pulse coming to a shattering end. He felt the blood drain from his face, a dark sort of pang sinking into his abdomen. Speechless. He was speechless. His light eyes became fixated on the figure who unexpectedly charged towards him. He wanted to run, to dash completely backwards and head on back to home. As he urged his legs to move, he found himself fastened on the timber. Sakura called his name. He cringed. She made her way towards him, her delicate fingers suddenly tangled in his locks as she pulled him, her warm lips bashing into his cold mouth. His arms instinctively pulled back, his body unacquainted with the touches it was receiving. She giggled in the middle of her kiss, as she tugged his jacket to catch a deeper part of his mouth. Naruto was taken aback, shocked by the gesture. He shivered from the warmth he felt by her touch. Her scent unexpectedly stirred his conscience. "I'm sorry, Naruto, I couldn't help it." Her arms swooped from under his jacket, embracing his waist. "I missed you. I realized what a mistake I was making all these years." He stared at Sakura, her rosy orbs filled with affection, with gentleness. He would have replied, but he found it hard to breathe at the moment. That dinner was so beautiful. Dinner. When in the world? I forgot how funny you are. She mused, continuing to admit herself. Gosh, I love you so much. He felt himself grow numb. Finally, she pulled back, a sweet smile still plastered on her lips. We have a lot to talk about. She tapped her fingers against his parted mouth, adding, but I have to do something first. I have a bet to finish. Sakura turned away from him, skipping her way back to the end of the docks. Naruto felt his mouth quiver. Terrified, his eyes darted to the female who appeared to be shocked, her fingers clutched towards her chest. He could not quite specify the look in her eyes, from so far away, but he could feel the heartache tear at him. Ino, he called out, awkwardly, nervously. Miraculously, his legs gave into the thought of movement. He stumbled a few steps before dashing ahead as fast as he could, despite the effort his conscience made to completely stop. Ino swallowed the awful lump that formed on her throat, indulged in what felt like hatred and rage. Her fingernails dug angrily into her palm, she felt the pinch of her skin breaking, but did not flinch. As Sakura drew nearer, she had all the urge to give her so-called friend a nice blow to the face. Yet, she stopped herself, and held all the accumulated bitterness within. As much as she wanted, oh how she longed for relenting into abhorrence, she knew Asuma-sensei had taught her much wiser. Ino flung the scarf over her head, no longer concerned with its well-being. She could not remember if she yanked her shirt off in an attempt to get herself equipped for the race, or because it was delaying her chance to beat down Sakura, but the water no longer looked so chilly in her dearest opinion. Ino bit her lip, pulling at the jeans that clung to her, before stepping into the cool pond without hesitation. All the lessons in the world could not prepare her for this. Geez, Ino, you're in a hurry. Sakura chuckled, taking her jacket off. So what will we have? To the end of the other side, Ino blurted out, too enraged to speak any further. Sakura dipped herself into the water, yelping from the icy water. It's so cold. She brought her arms to her chest, giving out a shiver or two. She placed her fingers onto the docks, raising herself enough for Naruto to see. It's a race, and watch me win. Sakura advised him. So, here goes nothing. She laughed, tapping her palm onto the surface. 1, 2, 3. Naruto scurried, hoping to get around the body of water before either of them could finish. He ran through the woods, his eyes were fixated on Ino. Whoa, he murmured, astounded by the dangerous will in Ino's eyes. She practically ripped through the water, against the flow of the wind. He could not believe it, the way she pushed her arms forward and swam through the bottomless pond. Sakura was miles behind, she too trying to make her way through the water. Naruto shouted Ino's name, gasping for air as he ended his own race. He felt himself double over, almost losing his balance as the sense of his surroundings was now lost to him. You don't understand, he said, surprised even by his own tone of voice. He watched as her arm grabbed a hold of the side of the pond's edge, her digits digging into the dirt as she propelled herself forward, winning the race. She took 2 steps out of the pond, drips of water trickling down the curves of her body. Her eyes held a dark tint to them as she took a few more steps forward. Hard, forced breaths released from her chest, she wrung her hands into fists as she forced herself to ignore the person in front of her. Naruto grabbed her wrist, tugging at it weakly. He stared at the ground, the echoes of the soft wind becoming the melody that rang into his ears. Ino, please, you don't understand. A loud snap, a crack of a whip was heard afterwards. At least, that is how Naruto interpreted it. His cheek was forced to face away from her as her palm made contact with his face. It was a livid gesture, he could feel the tears build up in his eyes from the sting. Her huffs of air recoiled as she continued to walk away, wordlessly. He stood there, his fingers raising to hover over the warm spot. Shit, he thought to himself, the sick reality beginning to sink in, where the nightmare of having to face his fears was propelling itself into truth. It didn't matter to him anymore, what Sakura must have thought, but he felt himself quickly grew tense, his hand too jolted to rub at his sore cheek. She seems in a real hurry. Sakura clapped her hand against the ground, breathing in loud, tired puffs. I guess she won. Shikamaru grunted, not at all fond of being ignored. Sure, he missed that whole match Ino would not stop talking about for weeks, the very same contest that he obviously was training Ino for these 10 days or so. He guessed oversleeping was not the greatest excuse in the world. He sighed once more, his knuckles knocking against the door in an impatient manner. The Jonin glanced to the left and to the right, witnessing no onlookers as he began to peek into the small hole that was carved from the door, in a heart shape of course. It was embarrassing, having to peep through the house for his silly friend. Yet, that is how far Ino's stubbornness would go, as long as she got the attention she wanted. Amazing, he scoffed, his hand cupping the doorknob. From the peephole, he could see Ino situated on a kitchen stool, her back to him. You have quite the ability to disregard, he said, opening the door in full swing as he entered her house. It couldn't have been that bad. It was then that his dark eyes spotted the unnamed bottle of sake rolling from the kitchen counter, plummeting into the carpet with a muffled cling. I guess the event called for a celebration. He snorted, a bit surprised, he knew Ino was not an alcoholic. His eyes widened, the sight of the counter had him alarmed. 4 bottles of unarranged sake bottles were resting upon the surface of the counter. A few drips of the container to the far right dribbled in a small puddle of clear liquid. Wow! He kicked the bottle, witnessing it twirl with the motion, before gradually coming to a halt, pointing its tip towards the girl in front of him. The aura that poured out of her left him wordless. She had her back hunched in his direction. He bit his lip, concerned by the soft pitter-patters of her breathing pace. His hand reached forward, gently brushing against her shoulder blades. On impulse she spun from her chair, lifting her eyes as she gazed at the taller man in front of her. A sick silence passed between them. Shikamaru could not think of any preceding words for the life of him. He understood that this was not any sort of feeble problem. But before he could actually find any consoling words, any soothing utterances, just about anything to keep her from looking so completely miserable, she yanked his shirt, pulling herself into his chest. He felt her heartache spill in front of him in the sort of sense that left him frightened. She cried, her dry sobs reverberated, ringing his ears. He figured she had already cried before, by the hoarseness of her vocal cords. A frown smothered his mouth, as he accepted his impression of helplessness. Instead of scowling, a loose sigh escaped him. He gradually brought his arms against her midsection, pulling her into the tightest embrace he possibly could. She lost her balance, squeezing herself onto his torso. He allowed his teeth to skim along his bottom lip, attempting his best to speak any sort of assurance, but found none. "I'm sorry," he spoke moments later, "for whatever it is that you're feeling." The more she cried, the more foolish she felt.